Good evening, everyone. Welcome board. Welcome on board. Sorry, we're a bit late. Usual traditional technical issue. Welcome to the February 2020 Space Association meeting. Thanks for coming along tonight. We've got a really interesting night tonight, and we're going to get straight into it. I'm Peter, the captain supervisor, the president of the Space Association. So just a quick rundown of what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to have a quick look at what we're doing as a group, some things we've got in the pipeline. Hope you're interested in having a look at all of that. Then we've got our feature with Angelo, National's Commercial Crew Program. And then we've got Russian Space News with Igor. Good to have him back on board. And then we're going to have a bit of a break and a bit of socialising, say hello to someone you haven't met before. And then we're going into Space News with Rennie. He's here somewhere. There he is, down the back. And then we're going to be thrown out in the street and beaten up at 10 o'clock. So be ready for that. So just straight up into it. This Wednesday night, the Moon Village Association are running their public forum on the moon, Mini, this Wednesday evening. It's at the M Pavilion in the Queen Victoria Gardens. From 6:15 to 8:15. So I'm not sure what the weather forecast is, but it's an outdoor venue with a roof, so we'll see how we go. You do need to book by Brentford. It is free, but you just need to book. Let me just see if this works. Oh, look at that. Come on, round of applause. Okay. So they're going to have a presentations by prominent space thinkers and a public discussion talking about longer-term ventures to the moon, scientific purposes, exploration, long-term human habitation. Can going to the moon reconcile Earth? Good question. We're partnering with them. Ashley is going to be heading on there and recording the whole session, so that'll be available through the usual channels. And it's going to be an interesting night. They had an event last year I wasn't able to go to. I think it was a good event. It was not quite well attended as they'd hoped, but they're back at it again. They've got some nice speakers. Dr. Alice Gorman's going to be there, Dr. Space Chunks, she's a space archaeologist. Sheridan Dubby and Kerry Doherty, as you probably may know Kerry, she's a space historian. She's got an OMA for astronautical historian, as she is. And a couple of other speakers there, someone on space law, and sorry, I meant to push the wrong button. And this person here, culture of company working. Oh, I was always seating. I like it. Very nice. All right. So, who can tell me this movie? But I've got a deleted scene that you probably have not seen before. Sorry, it's hard to read the writing that well. So that was 50 years ago this April. April 12 to 18. So, the Space Association is getting back on the horse and partnering again with the Sun Theatre in Yarraville. For those of you who went to the Apollo 11 event last year, we're partnering up with them. They're very enthusiastic. And we're going to be putting on a special day with them. We're showing the Apollo 13 movie. And we've chosen the date of April the 18th, Saturday the 18th. That corresponds with the splashdown, which actually took place the 18th of April, Australian time at 4:07 a.m. No, we'll be there at 4:07 a.m. But we just thought we'd grab that date. For those who haven't been here, this is the Sun Theatre. It's an old Art Deco theatre. The owner, Michael Smith, bought it a number of years ago and renovated it in a very sympathetic Art Deco style. Just an amazing place, amazing group of people out there. Actually, we had a really, really fun event with them on Apollo 11 back in July. So we'll do a similar thing to what we did last year with a ticket package, which will include some snacks and drinks and that type of thing. Some of the details are still to be finalised and worked out, but it's put in your calendar. We'll give you more details in the coming couple of meetings. So we're tentatively calling Australia an Apollo 13 because we wanted to really focus on Australia's involvement in Apollo 13, which is actually quite significant, and we're going to help you to understand that. So we're going to be showing the movie. We were thinking there might have been a director's cut coming out for the 50th anniversary of the mission, they haven't. So we'll be showing the movie, but we'll be doing it in a bit of an event day. So they'll be ticketed to cover the event and catering. There'll be snacks and drinks. Talking about a possible option to purchase a commemorative item like a mug or something like that. None of that's worked out yet. Talking with the venue about whether they can actually facilitate that and have it as a purchasable option when you buy your ticket. So you just go ahead and pick it up when you get to the venue. All to be confirmed. You can also buy other alcoholic drinks and things there. So at this stage we've got the price of $30 for members and $35 for non-members, and the members will be getting a code like we did for Apollo 11 to get that discount. So the draft schedule on the day will be about 1 o'clock we'll get started. 1:30 we'll play the first half of the movie, part 1. Then we'll have an interval for a little while, for about 30 minutes, and you can have something to eat and go and say hello to people and do whatever. The second part of the movie will be after that, and then we're going to have a presentation. And I've underlined that because we've got a guest speaker lined up, and I think you're going to like this speaker. So I knocked up a couple of designs on this mug, so just thought you'd be interested to see. The idea here is you've got the service module before it all went haywire, and that's the tank that blew up. And this is what they asked the crew to do. And then the back of the mug, the before and after. So this is a drawing based on photographs of the damage, etc. And that's the actual quote from the mission log as opposed to the movie script. So anyway, thoughts, suggestions, objections, more than welcome, but nothing's locked in at this stage. Going back to the event itself, this guest speaker I alluded to, his name is John Saxon. He's born and educated in the UK. He's an engineer in the development of the world's first inertial navigation systems. And he flew British V-bomber types, dropping air-to-ground missiles in Woomera. That's how he's... And then in the Apollo era, he became operations supervisor at Honeysuckle Creek in the MISFIN network, the Manned Spaceflight Tracking Network. He supported all the Apollo missions in the main operations console. So he was there when all that happened. And he also had the unique experience of talking to Charlie Duke and John Young on the lunar surface. I'll let John explain how that happened, but it wasn't supposed to happen, but he actually did. So, and there's a bit of a story that goes along with that as well, but both during that and afterwards. After Skylab and unmanned missions, John retired in 1995 as the operations manager down at the Canberra Deep Space Communications Centre and did some consulting over at JPL. So this guy knows space inside, outside and backwards. And this is a picture of John on his console with, back in black and white days. And this is Mike Din, for those people who know Mike Din. He was the deputy manager of Honeysuckle Creek. And the obligatory cigarette in his hand there. Now, we talked about them talking to Charlie Duke and John Young on the moon. After the mission took place, there was a discussion while they were on the moon about having a beer, and they actually ended up having that beer a number of years later while they were in Canberra, so full circle there. So John will be giving us a bit of an overview of what Australia's role in Apollo was, his recollections of Apollo 13, and he's got some really interesting stuff. He was on console when the thing blew up. What was happening in Honeysuckle Creek, Carnarvon, Parks, Tidbinbilla, Deakin Switching Centre, PMG, OTC, ABC. There was a whole gamut of people involved, some of which were scheduled to be involved in the mission, but others which were called in an emergency basis, like Parks. So it was a huge effort. And they actually did some technical stuff prior to Apollo 13, which actually helped them to actually establish communications with Apollo 13, which is quite fascinating. Well, John will go into that. Yeah, so it should be a good session, and then will be a good Q&A at the end of that. So if nothing else, I mean, okay, we can all go down and see the movie or get it on DVD or watch it on live stream, but actually being in the room with John and hearing what he has to say, these guys aren't getting younger, right? None of us are. So here's a picture of John recently. This is the dish that was actually at Honeysuckle Creek when the site was deactivated. It was actually moved down to Tidbinbilla and was active for a number of years I think about 5 years ago, or maybe longer, it was parked up, and now it's a National Historic Site. And that was the dish that received those first TV pictures of Neil coming down a ladder and putting his foot on the moon. So, pretty amazing stuff. Alright, so going back to the Australian Apollo 13, this is hoping what we're going to look like, although I hope we'll have more people in the seats. So once again, the idea was we'll get the tickets on sale by the 1st of March by the Sun Theatre website. Once again, you get that email with the code to book, and we'll email those out to you. For those who don't know, the Sun Theatre is out in Yarraville, just over the Westgate Bridge. Pretty easy place to get to, nice place. There's a train line goes right behind it, and the station is directly behind it, so pretty easy for that, and pretty easy for parking on a Saturday afternoon. And this is an actual picture. I thought I'd throw that in a bit of a laugh. Yeah, so that's where it's going to happen. So once again, put it in your diary there. And everyone's right. It's not just a members-only event. We had 180 people at the Apollo 11 thing, so we filled the theatre last time. So, okay, it's not the Apollo 11 50th, so it may not have as much pull power, but the good thing about it is we can scale the event up and down based on the numbers, so get everyone along. Another thing that happened back a couple of years ago, Michael and I went over to Space Fest, and we actually met up with this Australian bloke who was putting a documentary together called Searching for Skylab. That's now finished, complete. And we have kept in touch with him, and he's very keen to have a screening of it here in Australia. They did have a screening about a month ago in Canberra and Esperance, or Carnarvon, Esperance I think it is, and he came out for that. But he, unfortunately, was a real flying visit. It was funded by the West Australian government or something, so we couldn't get onto that. But we're talking with him about having a screening here in Melbourne. Nothing firm yet, but yeah, Dwight Stephen Bonecki, his name is. He's an Australian guy who lives in Germany, I think, or Norway. I think, Germany. Yeah. So he created to bring attention to the important role of Skylab. They hoped to release it for the 45th anniversary of the launch, but lacked funds. It was all basically self-funded. Kickstarter campaign was used, so they raised the extra money for it, and it was finally completed. Well, a preview was screened in November 2018. It premiered in Huntsville on the February the 8th of 2019. Two of the Skylab astronauts were there at that premiere, and they loved it. They hadn't seen a lot of footage before themselves. And it has received highest praise. We saw a preview of it in Space Fest. It was pretty impressive, very good. So, once again, none of this is confirmed, but just going on the dates of the actual mission, the launch of the actual lab itself took place on the 14th of May in 73, and it re-entered in Australia, over Australia in 79. The manned missions, the crew missions went up and down on these dates. So I've underlined the July 11th. So at this stage, this is part of the stuff in Australia that they recovered on the back of the tip truck, back of the trailer. And I think a lot of that, some of that's in WA still, and some of it's over in the States in museums. So at this stage, we're penciling, I hasten to add penciling, Saturday, July the 11th to have that screening. So nothing firm yet, but we'll let you know. Possibly the Sun Theatre again, possibly some sort of involvement with Dwight, the director, and possibly some sort of involvement with Jack and Ed, although Dwight has assured me that they're getting beyond travelling to the other side of the planet now, so but they're really keen to support him, Dwight, and his documentary, so we might have a pre-record or some sort of Skype involvement with those guys, so that'd be kind of nice, so put that on your calendar. Okay, just to underline what we're doing, fourth Monday of the month is our schedule apart from December as far as meetings. The AGM is due in around the April-May time, so we're looking at possibly April 27 or May 25 for the AGM, so we'll let you know what happens and when that's established. The committee will have to make that decision based on all factors. So the next meeting will be Monday, March the 23rd. And once again, we are a member-based organisation, so if you are a member, thank you very much. If you're not a member, think about joining up, and if you're a lapsed member, come on back. We'd love to have you back on board. And Tim will gladly take your money. Sorry, I pointed the laser at Tim, now he's mine. So. Just a quick 3 slides I've got on the Australian Space Agency. Busy month or two. So they opened their office in Adelaide on the 19th of February. They had a ribbon cut with the Prime Minister and the Science Minister and the head of the Space Agency, Megan Clark. This is the location of it in the precinct here. This is where the agency is. They're building this Discovery Centre and the Mission Control Centre, and they've got stuff happening all over the place. So quite exciting for that. So they're all guns blazing. There's a number of space companies already located themselves in there. They're calling it L4 or Location 4 or something they call it. There we go. The Moon Mars Initiative is an initiative of the Australian Space Agency to consult across the country feedback, input and design of a $150 million Moon Mars Initiative. Grant opportunities are there, so if you've got an idea about how to get to the moon or do something on the moon, put your application, get some of that money. They're doing consultation sessions across the country, and they've actually already done some. Started off in February. They've already done the February 14, 17, 20th, 21st, and tonight in Sydney. Today in Sydney. Not sure what time it happened. There's a couple of coming up, Canberra and Brisbane, and then the final one is in Darwin. I've highlighted the one in Canberra because they're actually going to live stream it. So that'll be live streamed on Tuesday, 25th, from 10 a.m. and it'll be recorded, and you can go ahead and watch it at a later time after that. So, and I think you can get involved as well in that.
Peter, question, that logo, Australian Space Agency, is that an official thing, or is it?
It's an official thing. Your sticker on there, that's from the Australian Space Agency.
Do we have a chance to protest it?
Protest against it. Protest away. Yeah. Now, this is Dr. Megan Clark. You want her job. So basically she's leaving, and the government has advertised for a new head of the Australian Space Agency. So, you'll be the preeminent advisor to the challenges, drives and opportunities of the Australian space sector. So, if you're looking for some change in direction, or it isn't your direction and you're looking for something else, something more, you report to the Minister. They're encoding the applications from wide background. I'm not sure they have flight attendants, but anyway, we'll see how that happens. Further information is available. You've got until Friday to put your application in. And if you send it to that email address. So we'd love a space association member to be the head of the Australian Space Agency, and we'll get the whole thing moved to Melbourne. Alright, that's about me done. Now I'm a bit confused about this. This is the National Commercial Crew Program with Angelo. I don't know, it's old news because astronauts have been doing commercials for years. This is Wally Schirra, this is Neil flogging Chrysler. So I don't know what's new in the National Commercial Crew Program. It's over to Angelo.
Thanks, Pete. Here we go.
My sense of humour.
Bit of a wry sense of humour. So, Ashley, what would you like me to do? Use this one? Yeah. All right. First thing we do is turn that off and go to mine. Okay. A little bit of a history thing here that really describes why we've got to where we are. So it's a bit of history and a bit of commercial crew. You've probably seen over the various months quite a bit on commercial crew, but we'll start here. NASA Commercial Crew Program. But what actually leads up to it? The space shuttle. 1981 to 2011 was a partly reusable system, 135 missions. Total program cost about 200 billion. Hang on, I just got a little pop-up. Get rid of that. And there they are. They had 5 space shuttles. These are just some personal videos. I just have. This is my memories of the space shuttle. We took this in 2010 actually at the Cape. Peter Alwood was on top of the vertical assembly building and Mike and I were here, which is about 6 kilometres out. I haven't seen this for many years, so it's worth playing. Hey? This was in my younger days, when I wasn't. Here we go. Here we go. That was the third last shuttle flight, STS-132, and it was amazing to watch. That's how far away we were. That was Atlantis, which flew 2 missions later in the final flight in 2011 of the shuttle program. All right, that's pretty cool. And there you have it. That was Atlantis also in orbit. Unfortunately, out of all the 135 flights, 2 didn't quite get there. We know about Challenger, we know about Columbia. And there's the Challenger. All astronauts died in that particular accident. It came down to O-rings in the solid rocket booster. You can see on the left bottom corner, you'll see the puff of smoke where the very cold O-rings, which were supposed to be elastic, weren't elastic, and let the flame through. You can see in the top right-hand corner the flame slowly burning its way through the support strut, which gave way. The solid rocket booster veered into the top tank and exploded. That was it. Then we go into Columbia. They also perished, and that was foam debris. And you'll see the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see an experiment that was done by NASA after the accident and verified that very light foam travelling at 500 miles an hour can cause that kind of damage. So before that, I think their damage analysis was done on an Excel spreadsheet. So as good as NASA are, they're not always as good as you think they are. So the achievements, and there were numerous. I won't go into this, but construction of the ISS was big. Service missions, human experiments in low Earth orbit. They carried to Leo all these various spacecraft. One of the most important was obviously the Hubble. But not just Earth orbit, they went beyond that. And there are a number of key missions there and interplanetary missions like Galileo, Ulysses, Magellan. The legacy. With the hindsight of, history, you can look at it and you say, well, international cooperation was a real plus. It brought old adversaries together. It was an amazing technical achievement. There's not denying that. However, despite its promises, it was very costly. It was about 1.5 billion per launch. Crazy numbers. Due to cost, it actually prevented the development of a replacement. So it resulted in a huge gap like the one between Apollo and the Space Shuttle. I mean, the gap since 2011 to now is, what, 9 years? It forced America to be reliant on Russia. It's certainly not a safe vehicle, 1 in 65 chances of catastrophic failure, and has, as Len would point out to us, has restricted us to low Earth orbit and kept us out of deep space for 30 years. So, was it a good program? Let you decide. Anyway, okay, so this is the size comparisons. You'll see the shuttle next to the Saturn V, next to the Falcon Heavy. Moving on. Space shuttle replacement. The landscape since the shuttle program became active is littered with failed follow-ons. A whole series of factors, some political, but a lot of the problems were also technical. It wasn't just, political will. And could they have solved it with money? Probably. But that's not a definite. But also there was constant changes politically, which didn't help as each administration changed the goalposts constantly. That's been a constant sore point in trying to develop other spacecraft. Another constant problem is how do you ramp up a new program whilst you've got an old one still working? We've suffered that legacy on numerous occasions since the space program began. They've really not found a way to do it. It wasn't as economical as they thought, but one of the things about the space shuttle though was it did its job too well, and as a consequence it didn't force NASA or anybody else to go the next step. The truth is a follow-on should have occurred earlier. So in the 1980s, under Ronald Reagan, NASA and the Air Force collaborated on a secretive project known as X-30, the National Aerospace Plane. Now, a lot of you might remember this particular program. The program lasted over a decade, but technical hurdles and budgetary issues forced it to eventually be cancelled. And that was it. Then the next big effort, which also fell short, was the X-33 single-stage orbit. It was a development between NASA and Lockheed Martin. And then they started to play this commercial thing about, maybe Lockheed Martin want to put some skin into the game. But it confronted some real big technical issues, and lo and behold, it got cancelled too. Other test programs during the time, even up till the Constellation program, we saw the Shuttle C, and there was talk about bringing huge loads into orbit, low Earth orbit, but also there was talk about going to Mars and going to Venus with a number of these launches. Other initiatives, Sally Ride advocated the establishment of a permanent moon base by 2010 and landing of a crew on Mars early in the 21st century. Ronald Reagan approved some of the policies, but he revised the policy, but surprisingly, I couldn't understand this. A lot of it was classified. But the expansion of human presence in the solar system was certainly on Reagan's books. Of course, a new administration followed. July '89, at the anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, the 20th, George Bush, if you recall, made a statement to construct Space Station Freedom and sending humans back to stay, ultimately sending astronauts to explore Mars. Other initiatives, he sent Dan Quayle, if you can see him on the top right. He was going to run the Space Council. However, in April '92, under George W. Bush, Golden became the NASA administrator. During his tenure, exploration beyond Earth orbit was pretty much abandoned, and the faster, better, cheaper strategy was applied. The writing was on the wall for deep space. Other initiatives, when the White House National Science and Technology Council released its report, It specifically, in 96, it lacked any mention of human exploration beyond it. The next day, Clinton stated that a human mission to Mars was too expensive and instead affirmed America's commitment to a series of less expensive initiatives. It wasn't until 2004 that President Bush, W, unveiled a new vision that laid out the foundation for the shuttle retirement, and that was the Constellation program. Interestingly enough, Clinton, who sort of abandoned space, was a Democrat, so it was only natural that a Republican president would reinstate it. And unfortunately, I'm a cynic, but I'm afraid a lot of this has a lot of political undertones. Constellation, what was all that about? Major goals of the program were completion of the ISS through the shuttle, return to the moon no later than 2020, we'd be on the moon now, a crewed flight to the planet Mars as the ultimate goal. There were technological gains. Now the Constellation program, you've got the main logo, and you've got Ares on the left, which is the big rocket comprising two rockets, Orion, which is a capsule that carries the men, and we've got Altair, which is a lunar lander. And there they are. You'll see the shuttle, then you have Ares 1. There were two Ares models. The Ares 1 was to take crew into space, and the big Ares 5 would take the hardware onto the moon. There are the components. So from 2004 to 2009, well, a long time, NASA Administrator Constellation began its response to the goals that were set by his father, basically. Then Mike Griffin ordered a complete review. He was then the NASA Administrator. Its findings were to develop a sustained human presence on the moon, including a robust precursor program. So they started working on the Constellation. Now here's where we get to commercial crew. He says in 2004 they already started the replacement for the space shuttle. And it was all for the reasons of, going to the moon, harvesting the moon and doing things in space exploration. But what had come up, and this was Bush, wasn't Obama that a lot of people think, there was a component in the estimated original policy of $230 billion through to 2025 was the commercial crew and cargo program. And that's where it actually came from. But there were still problems with the big picture. But from the big picture, the little picture that we've now got comes into fruition. So Mr. Obama comes in and he declares Constellation to be over budget, behind schedule and lacking in innovation. So he conducts another review and he basically turns around and says neither a return to the moon nor a crewed flight to Mars was within NASA's current budget. The Augustine report produced a number of alternatives, but basically on February the 1st, President Barack Obama announced a proposal to cancel the program. Now, that was to cancel the big Constellation program. Absolutely. Okay, that's in this slide too. You're absolutely right. President Obama hosted a space conference in April 15th, and it just so happened that we had one of our SAA media correspondents there in Andrew Rennie, and he was at that particular meeting, if I recall. Is that right, Rennie? Andrew? And President Obama basically, he was being criticised because he basically was going to kill off the Constellation program and just proceed with the commercial crew stuff. But that killed it. And Andrew was at that meeting. At the conference, he discussed, some efforts and some of the Augustine report's initiatives, but he basically said, it's all too expensive. So it was a watershed period for America, and they were, it was done in a climate where space budgets were extremely low. I mean, you get the story that no president, since JFK, and even JFK one gets told, weren't really that interested in space, other than their political impact that they would have. So, everyone says, oh, Obama certainly wasn't interested in space, but he was forced by the Congress, again, because he's a Democratic president. The Republicans wanted to make their force known, and they insisted that elements of this super heavy, what then became SLS, continue on. Anyway, so the commercial crew program remained, and that became, at that point, the kind of highlight, one of the big highlights of the Obama administration. Oh, there are another few correspondents hard at it, as Constellation is cancelled. We were there at the time. Now, the one thing that did come out of that, they actually launched Aries 1. I don't know if people remember that, but that's quite a...
T-minus 10, 9,
quite a launch.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff of Aries 1X. Testing concepts for the future of new rocket design.
Would have shaken the astronauts significantly. That was its major technical problem.
Although they found that after this post-flight
Wasn't as bad? I know they had all sorts of damper solutions and all sorts of stuff going.
2 or 3 tons of steel.
That's just a modified solid rocket booster with a, I forget what the upper stage was. Yeah, in this flight it was mass, yes. I keep playing this because I like the separation. I mean, this is a huge rocket. It really is. And I don't know if I should play all of it, but you'll see it separate, the top bit separate and just tumble side to side.
Plus 80 seconds, we started our supersonic large altitude ID maneuver PTI. We see the response.
Yeah. Keep going. And this was the moon architecture that was proposed. Space launch system, we all know what came of it. But the most important takeaway from this was that it really put commercial crew into the limelight, because the SLS was just years and years away. And so let's talk about that. In 2010, we had the first part of this called CC Development 1, Commercial Crew Development Round 1. And this was an award that was made to 5 companies, as shown there, and it was really to just seek what could be done in a commercial area. This was the idea, and if you see on the end services, you're talking about in the 2017 range. How far away that is. And we had SpaceX, Boeing, and Sierra Nevada, who at that stage had already had some ideas. They'd already been working on this stuff and anticipating NASA's strategy. So you can see on this fiscal year 17 was when they were going to fly. Then they went to CC Development 2. It awarded $270 million to 4 companies and provided expertise to an additional 3 companies to further develop the ideas. And you can see that they're slowly downsizing the companies. So the commercial crew at this point that got funded was SpaceX, Sierra Nevada, Blue Origin, and Boeing. CCICAP came along in 2012, and they again down-selected Boeing, Sierra Nevada, SpaceX. And there you have it. That's what they looked like in those days. On top of a Falcon, the Dream Chaser was on top of an Atlas, and Boeing on top of an Atlas as well. CPC was another interim one. little packages kept going out. It was hard to follow. It's a bit like the Lunar Lander. You try to figure out what's going on there. It's little packages everywhere. And this was the same. But it eventually led to CCT CAP, which was Commercial Crew Transportation. And that was 2014. So basically they awarded 6.8 billion. We had 4.2 to Boeing, and we had 2.6 to SpaceX. And 2017 was envisaged as the operational flights. And there you have it. And you can see that little picture, the thing that caught my eye, I've already said it, was the amount that they got. SpaceX got considerably less. This one, the takeaway is Boeing, $90 million a seat. SpaceX, $55 million. That's still that is the current estimate. There we have CST-100. There we have Crew Dragon. 2015.
Restart now.
What do you
know? Restart tonight.
Holy cow. What do I do here? Hang on.
Pick the middle one.
Yeah, but I don't have it.
Move up to the screen.
Oh, right. Move your mouse into the screen.
I've lost my position too. Oh, I see. Big a time. Can you get me back to that screen? No, that's not it. I had too late. Sorry. Do it again. Do it again. Next one. Yeah, I just want to find out where I got to. Okay, here we go. I'm there. That's okay, I don't mind using the mouse. Done? No.
What was it, 4 years?
It was just keep going, stop, go up. There it is. Alright. Sorry guys. Do you want me to use that?
Probably is, yeah.
Alright. Okay. So 2015, we actually had the name of 4 astronauts that would work in with the commercial crew to develop the commercial spacecraft, and there they were. There they are. Bob Behnken and Eric Bowe. They will be the first to launch on SpaceX's Crew Dragon. And sorry, it's these two guys. Sorry, my apologies. Doug Hurley, Bob Behnken. These two will be part of the Boeing crewed missions. There they are. Again, they're all experienced astronauts. They all flew in the shuttle on numerous occasions, so they're certainly got a pretty good pedigree. In 2016, Boeing and SpaceX design and manufacture hardware. The international docking adapter got designed. They lost one on one of the cargo flights on a Dragon where it blew up at that time, so they had to build another one. They got 2 of them, and that's a kind of an adapter that's multi-purpose for international spacecraft. 2017, Boeing and SpaceX continue to develop. New spacesuits got unveiled. There you have it. The blue for Boeing and the white spacesuits that you see there for SpaceX. 2018, testing ramps up, and you'll find that more astronauts were assigned. And there you have it. And there's a number of them that are slated to SpaceX and a number are slated to Boeing. 2019, this is when it really started to happen last year. SpaceX Demo 1, very successful mission. A Boeing pad abort test, average. And Boeing orbital test flight, total disaster. And when I say total disaster, it flew well and all the rest of it, except the software was, anything could have happened, as they found out later, and we'll talk about that. So, 2020, this year, what's happened so far? We had the SpaceX in-flight abort. Very successful outcome, paving the way to a crewed flight. Future launch dates are currently under review. However, the tentative date for SpaceX is the 7th of May. Working date. It'll probably slip a little bit, but I think NASA's getting sick of paying, 86 or $87 million to the Russians for transport to the space station. NASA is currently considering whether it's going to fly the OF2 mission, which is Boeing's mission that failed to dock with the space station and had no end of software issues. So at the end of all that, once they fly these Demo 2 in SpaceX or OFT2, they will be given commercial contracts to fly astronauts to the space station. I think each have got 2 flights with the option of 6, each of them. But the Soyuz rocket, as we speak, continues to be used. There we have it. The old reliable workhorse has been going on for a long time and still going well. And there's spacecraft comparison. And it's good to see that you've got the Apollo sitting right back there, but you've got this new sweet Dragon V2, CST-100, and Orion. Federation, don't know if that's still happening, Igor? It's changed names, I know. I'm not sure I can pronounce that second name, but okay, let's talk a little bit more detail about Boeing. The CST-100, that's what it looks like. Most people know it's got a service module and a capsule. Its design life, 60 hours free flight, 210 days docked. Its launch mass is 13 tons. Crew capacity up to 7. Sorry? Keep going. Yeah. So, Starliner is Boeing spacecraft. It will support the crew to the ISS. The capsule is slightly larger than the Apollo command module. Starliner holds up to 7 people, and it's designed to be compatible with a number of vehicles. They made that deliberately. So you can see it's got capability to the Atlas, the old Delta, even SpaceX. So it can be adapted to Falcon 9 and the Vulcan, which is ULA's new rocket. Engines are being delivered for that soon, so it really is happening. There it is, sitting on the pad 41. That's what pad 41 looks like nowadays, except it's got that big tower that you can see there for manned spaceflight. And there it is actually going up. Overview. Here's the selling point. The CST-100 design draws upon Boeing's experience with NASA's Apollo Space Shuttle and ISS programs. Trouble is, most of the blokes that worked on those programs no longer work for Boeing. Anyway, that's how they sell their expertise. We'll use NASA docking system. It uses Boeing's lightweight ablator for its heat shield. Solar panels there. Unlike US spacecraft, what distinguishes this particular spacecraft is it lands on the ground. The idea is you keep water out of the capsule, a lot easier to reuse, to get it ready for another launch. So 5 landing areas are planned in Western USA, and so it gives it a lot of opportunity to land anywhere, especially if there's a problem. Includes and it's part of the contract. Boeing have sold this to NASA, but they've got 1 tourist seat. So in every flight they can actually put a tourist there somewhere that would go up, and of course you want tourists to go to things like the Bigelow space stations. The development of the CST-100, the letters CST stand for Crew Space Transportation, and people thought the 100 was about the 100-kilometre Kármán line, but it was just an arbitrary designation by a corporate office. Boeing said, and here's the key to this, they could be operational by 2015, subject to NASA giving them money, funding. It also indicated they would proceed with the development of CST-100 only if NASA implemented the Commercial Crew Transport Initiative that was announced by Obama at that time. Boeing executive stated the NASA investment would allow Boeing to close the business case, while this would be very difficult without NASA. So without NASA, there'd be no CST-100. So in addition, they would also, to close out its business case, would also have to have other commercial companies work with it, like Bigelow and Tourist Seats. So in 2010, 11, all these things that we spoke about before happened. Wind tunnel tests were occurring, and so it wasn't until 2014 that they got the big dollars to complete its spacecraft by 2017. Interestingly enough, I spotted this. I don't know if you've heard the news, but William Gerstenmaier has actually joined the SpaceX team as a consultant under the quality assurance division. But he made a comment that the Boeing tender was probably the strongest proposal. So there you have it. That surprised me, but so they said. In 2015, they called it Starliner. November, just trying to go through all this to pick up the big, interesting bits. Again, this is a story of delay after delay. So from 2017, we roll into 2018, rolling into 2019. It was all a bit of a problem. In the meanwhile, the Atlas rocket was getting ready for the flights. So let me keep going here. So some of the dates there, we don't know if they're going to have a repeat of OFT1. I suspect that'll probably be where it'll end up, but they have to go and review the software. Testing, a lot of testing went on from 2011, airbags. Tests were carried out Mojave Desert. They tested the parachutes, and they also announced having the astronauts work closely with them. And there you see it. There's the parachutes. Boeing has 4 parachutes coming down, CST-100. Crew Dragon, the Crew Dragon has 4. And of course you've got the airbags. Inside's pretty snazzy, I must admit. Some great imagery of the insides. You'll see that they're very similar to SpaceX, but I think SpaceX probably wins the design award. Looks pretty cool, but you've got 7 seats in that. Very nice, very plush. Testing, Boeing. They have to have 4 for NASA's use, but they can have 7. And
my understanding is when NASA put some constraints on the seat orientation, it meant they couldn't fit the additional 3 for NASA.
It all depends what happens when they use it in commercial mode. You got to watch what happens in commercial mode as opposed to NASA business. Okay, so Boeing reported that again, test schedule is slipping. Again, it's just a constant slipping of schedule. In May 2019, last year, before they did their orbital flight, they ran this test. And you can see they tested all the systems, the hot fired, everything. My question is, why the heck at this point didn't they pick up the software problems? And interestingly enough, NASA's asked themselves the same question. But it's not only asked Boeing for it, it's also done some soul searching internally, saying to itself, why did we not pick this up? So there's a bit of review of what the heck's going on. November 2019, a pad abort test took place, and of those 3 chutes, only 2 came out. As it turned out, someone left a pin out of the 3rd parachute. Pretty amazing when you read some of this stuff. But it was regarded as a success. The orbital test flight was scheduled for spring 2019. As we know, that didn't happen until December. And this was it. This was a good version. We played this last week, but
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Roll complete. How many cut off? One minute cut off. Hit your arms. 40 kill parachute. Broke parachutes made.
and you'll see there's only 2. Other than that, it worked pretty well, actually. But a question I always ask myself is, why did Boeing get away with that whilst SpaceX had to do an in-flight abort test as well as one of those? Don't know the answer to that one.
Because SpaceX said that would do it.
Fair enough.
Two mains going to street. Base heat shield jettison.
So the heat shield drops
Airbags inflating.
and the airbags inflate. There's no retros, as I understand, when it hits the ground. Not like the Soyuz that has little retros at the end of it. And bingo.
Season touchdown.
So that went pretty well. First orbital test flight. This is where it all went haywire. It launched, however, an 11-hour offset in the mission clock caused the spacecraft to compute that it was in an orbital insertion burn when it wasn't. So that was the first of the problems. Before re-entry, it turns out the engineers also discovered another software error that affected the thruster firing needed to safely jettison the spacecraft. The long and the short of it is, had those things not been attended to, it could have ended in catastrophic failure, like at the entry point where the command module separates from the service module. They could have actually hit each other. Not a very good position to be in. So, as I said before, NASA is quite perplexed about this. There we have it. There's the launch. And I think we saw this last time. I might skip this. I've got 20 minutes. So this is a good one. This is actually riding it from the inside. What was that dummy's name? Anyone remember? Was that no. Rosie. It was Rosie. Whoa. Be a great ride. Maybe for $250,000 they might sell you a seat. I'll keep going, you get the drift. This is interesting. So there you go. There's the sequence of landing and the airbag deployment, and that's actually a picture that was taken in the dark as the CST 100 came in for a landing. And that's a picture of it after it landed, and that's in the processing facility getting it refurbished for its next flight. Boeing spacesuits, again, you know, a few of the advances in the design. They're lighter and more flexible through advanced materials and new joint patterns. Helmet and visor incorporated in the suit instead of detachable. Touchscreen sensitive gloves, interesting. And vents that allow astronauts to be cooler but can still pressurize the suit immediately. So that's basically what they look like. You saw a picture of that before. Pricing. The current 2020 price is in the order of 90 million per seat. SpaceX is about 55. Remember, they got double the amount of money to build the CST 100. Not double, but say 70% more. This contrasts with the 2019 Soyuz launch price of about $86 million per seat. So in fact, going CST 100 is more expensive. So look, I probably painted a, not so rosy a picture for Boeing, but they clearly got a bit of work to do. It'd be terrific once they solve these little problems, but they're certainly not in the same position as SpaceX. SpaceX had its problems too, but it's a very nimble company and can actually overcome a lot of issues very, very quickly, which they did. So, what have we got in a Crew Dragon? Its design life is 1 week, 210 days docked to the ISS. It turns out the CST-100, NASA were looking to turn the test flight into a long duration mission on the space station. Well, it turns out now NASA are talking about doing that with the Crew Dragon because it's the one that's likely to go up first. There are the various volumes. That's Dragon 1. Dragon 2, the Crew Dragon, has its heritage back to Dragon 1. And that's what it looks like with its service module. And there it is. I think that's a real picture, but I'm not quite sure. Docking to the space station. That's the real picture. That's the launch. That's the real launch. And that's the old historical pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. And as you can see, they've modified it quite extensively. But if you look to the right, you've got a Starship sitting there. So, and by the way, that's being built as we speak. So, it was also designed to carry up to 7 astronauts and cargo. The heat shield is designed to withstand Earth's re-entry velocities from lunar and Martian space flights. So this is clearly, from a heat shield point of view, streaks ahead. If you remember, some years ago, they were proposing this thing called Grey Dragon and Red Dragon, which were to land propulsively on the Moon and Mars using this particular spacecraft. They've always had a pusher type system of getting it off a rocket, and in fact they had pursued using those engines to actually propulsively land. NASA finally told it, no, we don't want that. But that's, Elon pursued this for some time. This particular issue was part of the reason why, and I'll get to it, one of these Dragons actually blew up on the pad before they actually flew one of their recent missions. The technical specs, 7 astronauts, 3-screen control panel, ocean landings, which always makes processing a lot harder. The Super Dracos are actually additive manufactured. They're 3D printed. There they go. These Super Dracos. I think they've got a bank of two each side, and they're in their own nacelles, as they call them, and so that if they blow up... No, here's another test. Pretty impressive. They do have a nose cone that actually protects the docking mechanism, and they open it up, and you've seen that with some of the pictures when they dock with the station. So he's been working on this since 2005. Yeah. Yeah. I was surprised. I read that too the other day. So the idea is to control... I mean, the Apollo used to sort of glide, and they used to be able to manoeuvre it, but this has got clearly a sliding mass that changes its centre of pressure, centre of gravity, and allows it to manoeuvre its way into re-entry so that you can get pretty precise landings. So that's pretty cool technology. So again, this goes through the process of getting this particular program up and running. The key features really, in 2015 we actually had a paddleboard. This was similar to the Boeing one that we saw.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch.
Right now, 170 meters per second. Slightly below nominal.
That's why they have fins on the back of that service module for aerodynamic guidance. Now it does all its elaborate manoeuvres.
Sequencing the mains. Passing through 600 meters. Downrange distance.
Anyway, you get the idea, and it splashes down. So they got through that. So the key milestones were pad abort test, uncrewed orbital flight to the ISS, which they did in demonstration mission 1, in-flight abort test, which they just did in January, and then it's the demonstration mission DM2, which is about to take place probably in May. Okay, so this is some of the tests that they were doing, and this was called Dragonfly, and it was really testing this propulsive landing hover. It's just holding itself into one position there. It's only a 5-second burn, but you know, pretty cool. And of course, there was a lot of testing on parachutes. Both Crew Dragon and CST-100, NASA was not too impressed with their parachutes. And they both had to do a lot of work. But SpaceX took on the challenge quite dramatically over the last year and a half, 2 years. And their parachutes are now just second to none. And they've got another 2 tests, I believe, before they're allowed to fly the manned mission. But they've now developed quite a lot of technical data and design processes to be able to really nail down parachute design. But there's the 4 parachutes. So they've been very successful over the last, as I said, year and a half probably, with parachute design. March 2019, the first orbital test. occurred. So it actually was probably one of the most automated, well, it was all fully automated. Often you have the astronauts get involved in some of the docking procedures, but this thing can do it on its own. And it demonstrated that really aptly in that flight. So, you know, thumbs up to all those gamers that work in the software department down at SpaceX. They do very well. Okay, that's inside. That's pretty cool. I could see myself sitting in one of those. And there's your 4 screens from 4 Tesla 3s, I suspect. DM1. That's one thing SpaceX really do well, and Jeff Bezos, great videos. That's Ripley.
So is that not the same port as all these documents?
I don't know if it can dock on a Soyuz port. No, it can't. Okay. Yeah. I think the new adapter that's there is meant to be an international design. Is it? Okay. Yeah. Okay. These are the 2 astronauts there. Here they come, hurtling through. There's Gwyn Shotwell there. There you have it. Pretty cool, huh? There it is on the boat. Bit of scorch marks, but looks pretty good. Now the explosion. The explosion, they were doing a test with that same capsule that you saw that went to DM1. They were doing that test down on the ground. And they turned it on and it went bang. No, it was what happened, and I'll describe it in a sec. And there it has. I don't know if NASA really clamped down on people sending videos out, by the way. I don't know if that guy's still working anywhere near NASA. But NASA don't like that kind of stuff getting out. So that's what happened, and there was a lot of nasty stuff. David, what's this fuel again? Not good stuff. Yeah. It's carcinogen. It's nasty stuff, and there it is. And they had to remediate the area where this blew up to make sure there were no nasties still sitting on the ground. Explosion during a test. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it was to do with the valves. Now, the reason they got valves at SpaceX is because they can reuse the thing. But to fix this problem, what they did was they put in, and what happened was there was a slug of some material go into the pipes. When they then went to ignite the thing, it sent a slug of that fuel into the valves. The valves basically disintegrated, caught fire, and the whole thing just went bang. So what they've done is they've put little plates in there, very standard in the space industry, and they just break under pressure. But they're used once, right? Yeah, they use once. It's not SpaceX's idea because they want to remember the propulsive landing stuff and reuse of the system.
It's not a burst disk, it's a check valve.
Yeah.
It's very common in chemical processes where there's a pressure,
Yep.
high pressure tank feeding another process. It's bizarre that they weren't there in the first place.
Well, there's reasons for it, and the reason is because of this reusability mantra that they have and the way they process it, because they just didn't want to put, they wanted just to use valves. Anyway, they've fixed those up. I forget where I actually... they've actually replaced the valves with burst discs, and they've added flaps to each Super Draco so that when it gets... before it hits the water, the flap closes, doesn't allow water to go into the engines. Water is a problem. Okay, moving on. In-flight abort test. Well, we all witnessed that last month, which was pretty spectacular. But this is not unprecedented. I love this picture because it just shows an Apollo abort test. But this was real abort test if you watch it, because the rocket disintegrates and the Apollo has to take off, and it does. So that's a good proof of technology.
So a bit of trivia. The Apollo abort system had 3 wires that ran down the side of Saturn V, and it had relay logic, so if any 2 of the 3 wires broke, it would fire the escape system. It was very simple.
Beautiful.
Very agricultural.
Yeah. I think the Americans spent $5 million developing a pen, a biro that would work in space, and the Russians used the pencil.
Half the didn't spend on private companies. The cost of that pen goes up with every telling.
Hey, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Yeah.
Did you hear the follow-up to that? If you use a graphite pencil in space, and this would break off, you get into some electronics.
Oh, great. They're great conductors, I hear. Graphite. We've seen this, but I'm not going to have time to play some of this, so let's keep moving. This is pretty cool. Watching this go, the booster eventually just breaks up, but there's some beautiful videos of that particular mission, the in-flight abort, and that they recovered that out of the ocean. It was obviously well made. I'm not going to play these. I'd like to, but I haven't got time. Oh, the booster incidentally blew up. After the Crew Dragon ejected, it blew up. There it is, just instantaneously going, and there it is in the sky. So there's some bits there. There it is again. There is the bit. There's the parachute system. The planned crewed flight is looking like May. Fantastic if it gets through. They're still analysing the results of that January launch. Crew Dragon pricing, as I said before. In 2012, Elon made a bit of a statement that'd be $20 million a seat. Well, that's now 55. Not too bad. Spacesuit development, again, all high technology. They're not meant for spacewalking. They're just meant to be inside a capsule to protect you if there's depressurization. There you have it. The assignments are going to be Bob Benkin and Doug Hurley will be flying, and do I get to general? Any idea what that is? That's somewhere in Russia. Igor, this is a test for you. This is just to end up. It comes off that rocket there, and it's the grid fins. It's the grid fins. I showed this last time, but those that haven't seen it, this is a bit of a spoiler. This is the biggest rocket ever designed, called Sea Dragon. This comes from a movie, For All Mankind, and it's an alternative history, but have a look at this. I haven't yet. This was a huge rocket, and I mean big. That dwarfs the Saturn V dwarfs this thing here. Speed of light. Where did I find this? 7.5 orbits per second at the surface. Sorry, go back. This is Earth to the Moon. Am I? This is Earth to Mars. So can you believe anything you're looking at out in the sky? I don't know. Anyway, that's an interesting little video. If you get a hold of it, it gives you all sorts of things. And on that note, enjoy. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hang on. Let me pull this. No, that's there. Okay, so just bear with me. Trouble is, this won't work if you're going to go off that.
No. Let's copy here.
Oh, you want to copy it?
Yeah,
all right.
I never worked from this one, which could be stole.
Why hasn't it come up?
I don't know.
Hasn't.
Are we breaking or are we? Just have...
It's supposed to pick up, but it hasn't.
Yeah.
Here it goes. Ah, beauty.
Place. Yeah.
It's all right. Igor?
Here. It's here. Copy.
All right, dude, you're on.
Always have trouble with this.
Now, what we'll do is we'll pull that out,
Yeah.
put that back in. When you use it, this is plus and minus, and that's the cursor.
I usually don't do
I don't either. All right, so let's fire up the...
slides.
That's okay. Done. You're ready to go, mate.
Is it on?
Yeah. Okay?
Yeah.
You're done?
Just tell me when I can start. Hmm? Yeah. I will. Yes. Yes. Can I start? Yeah. I'll try. Okay. Okay. My presentation is actually might be a little bit surprise for you because usually news from Moscow, it's scandal, corruption, and everything around politics. My stuff, which probably would be a little bit more boring and a little bit more technical. So, subtitle is "Meanwhile in Moscow" or things which you probably miss behind all of the scandals and social media. I have only 24 slides. Feel free to ask any questions in the middle before I forget or you forget. Still, Moon robotic exploration plans still did not change, except one thing: all plans moved to the right. They supposed missions, 5 missions supposed to be already on the Moon, but by various reasons they still on Earth, and even spacecraft not ready. The Luna 25 lander supposed to fly according to current schedule only in July 2021. The major reasons why they have been delayed because ExoMars mission has been moved by 2 years, and they potentially have a trouble with the parachuting system, Europeans, so it may be impact national Russian program in terms of moves, because there is only one company who responsible, which is the analog of NASA GPL. This is logo of NPO Lavachkin, the company who responsible for all interplanetary missions in Soviet Union. Apparently, Russia didn't have any successful one since 1991. 2024 lunar orbiter, 2025 lander. They targeted. They're going to target South Pole and probably try to find a deposit of ice and water. 2027 sample return mission from the same area, and I would put 2028 plus. They try to put a small lunar rover in the same area. We'll see. I don't know when it's going to happen, but eventually it will be done because they have a concept of manned and robotic program to work together and be controlled from lunar orbital station. Effectively, Soviet Union managed to do the same program with a much bigger number of missions, probably less time than current Russian plans. Question about Federation, which keep changing names, which has been renamed to Orel. Orel, which translation from Russian is eagle. It was name of the first Russian Navy ship in 17th century, I believe. They switched plan again with playing musical chairs with launch vehicles. They made full circle. They proposed to use Soyuz 5 launcher from Baikonur, but it's not going to happen because launch vehicle wouldn't be ready on time, and they switch back. They fall back to Angara A5. P stands for Manet, so it's a man-rated version of heavy Angara 5, and they're planning maiden mission of spacecraft which under development from 2009 in 2023. It would be unmanned autonomous mission to check endurance of spacecraft for at least 1 month, I believe. Life support system wouldn't be ready, otherwise they will put crew on this slide. Second mission would be unmanned, but spacecraft probably would be equipped with a proper life support system, otherwise they cannot operate in ISS environment. Yeah. It's a classical Russian, male-female thing, but it should be compatible with international docking. So, Energia trying to be compatible with international docking standard. And the reason why still using old-fashioned design, because it's actually less heavy. This is only one reason, because adaptive docking system has been developed since 1975, and the reason why it didn't change, it's purely mass constraint. 2025, again, it's a present schedule, but one God knows if it really happened in 2025. It's supposed to be a manned mission to ISS, probably crew of 2, potentially. Launch vehicle Yenisei, it's actually moon rocket, man-rated moon rocket. Unmanned flight, maiden flight will perform lunar flyby in 2028 from Vostochny. By the way, both launches from Vostochny. 2029, it would be full rehearsal of moon landing. They will put crew on the lunar orbital craft. They will dock with the lunar module. Lunar module would land without crew and come back. So they're trying to do I don't know, Apollo chance scenario without actually moving crew to the on board of lunar module itself. And that yes, yeah. So they decided not to put investment in Baikonur. The whole idea of Vostochny was to create an independent access to space from Russian territory. This is why they spent so much money, and we will talk about Vostochny upgrade probably in one of the last slides.
Okay, Igor, another question. The gateway, I don't see it mentioned there.
It should be on another slide. I'm sorry, you're jumping ahead. I'm talking the heading of this slide about manned spacecraft. Gateway would be another destination. And my understanding, manned moon landing and manned lunar orbit could be done with or without gateway. And there are a lot of political controversy about gateway. We will get to this later. So 2030 ultimately is the goal set by Putin, because he's motivating whole Russian space agency. He's trying to achieve what USSR did not do at that time in 70s. For him, it's a huge political credit. Again, I'm trying to avoid politics, but it's impossible to avoid. Again, I give you these numbers. This is who is who in the Russian zoo of launch vehicle under development. Interestingly enough, Soviet Union in 34 years managed to create only 15 different launch vehicles. Here, what Russia trying to do right now. And by the way, almost all of them, Angara 5M has a designation. All of them represent Russian rivers. I have no idea what they're going to do when they run out of project, because number of rivers in Russia are limited, and they're not creating new ones. Did anybody remember this series? All the rivers run. So this is what they do. I wouldn't be pedantic with the numbers. It's impossible to communicate. The most interesting stuff in the last two columns. Man-rated super heavy launch vehicles. This is last two columns which actually answer to SLS, to the NASA challenge to go to the moon, or to cooperate with NASA. Don't know how challenge these days. Man-rated launch vehicle, which they call Yenisei, can push 27 ton to the low lunar orbit. We're not talking about gateway. For gateway, obviously, because there are less delta V requirements, they can put something more. But they're still using major reference mission how to get to the polar 200 kilometers lunar orbit. Meaning they're not fully embracing lunar gateway project. And phase 2 of super heavy vehicle, it's like, you guess it right, it should be, it's done as good. Cargo version of super heavy vehicle could deliver 33 tons to low lunar orbit. So they cover it by two big rockets, which probably would provide fully capable transportation system from Earth to the moon. Now this looks like blast from the past, and this is ultimately an answer to challenge from SpaceX. They decided not to do vertical landing of the rocket. They came back to original idea of use vertical launch, horizontal landing of the first stage. Russian Space Agency created new design bureau. They call it Design Bureau Bartini. Bartini was Italian aristocrat, which actually, he was a communist. He worked for Russians during Cold War. He is Korolev highly acclaimed him because he told without his work Russia would never launch anything into space. Apparently he was one of the visionaries. Even he did not create any aircraft which went to serial manufacturing. So again, why I call it blast from the past? This was mid-80s concept for Energia 2, fully reusable space shuttle with winged Zenit boosters. This was a study funded by French. It's called Barguzin. Barguzin is a national park near Lake Baikal in Russia. Again, river connections. After French spent so much money, somebody make a statement that a noble idea to take a rocket stage, add some avionics, wings, stabilizer, came to reality that small rocket stage became a huge aircraft comparable with Airbus. So this was their experience. Feasibility was, this is why they tried to use LNG, liquid natural gas engines to make them reusable, and they tried to change solid boosters for Ariane 5, just to improve efficiency, decrease cost, and improve capability of Ariane 5. Did not fly. Remember I talked about Baikal? Surprisingly, this was a Krunichev proposal to have instead of boosters on first stage of Angara, to have flyby boosters. 2001, which was the scale model of these things was presented in Paris Air Show in 2001. Nothing happened. And Krunichev actually was lucky. They lobbied this project. They get funding, but around 2010 or 2011, they have been canned because Krunichev has problem with delivering Angara in first place. So again, this is example how nothing is lost in Russian space program. Everything which has been done once, even which put on mothballs, eventually would be retrieved and probably sold to agency as a brand new stuff, as a bleeding edge of technology. Okay, so this was a light vehicle. This is Angara 5, this cut down version as a full version. This is how facility on Vostochny would be look like after major upgrade. And like I said, decision was made to switch from Soyuz 5 to Angara 5P, because another reason, Ariel seems to gain additional weight, which Soyuz 5 probably would not capable to withstand. First maiden launch of Angara was in 2014. Nothing happened. The next flight probably would be New Year, in this year. The major reason they moved production from Moscow to some big city in Siberia, and obviously it have a huge impact on manufacturing scheduling. This is how it look like. A new version would be upgraded already because Angara 5, which flew in 2014, did not satisfy original requirements by Department of Defense. So the boosting up performance, Angara would be able to launch to low Earth orbit approximately 27.7 tons, which actually almost 3 tons bigger than Proton. And yeah, they're going to increase all of these universal rocket models probably by 10%. Yeah, nice picture from International Launch Services. The company still exists. It's a US-based company owned by Krunichev, which actually provide all commercial launches. Sorry. Can somebody answer question why we have 2 KGB? Sorry, 2 Angaras. They're using different upper stages. Smaller one is going to use upper stage made by Energia. It's called Block D. It's actually a legacy of N1 program. The same originally the same upper stage, upgraded probably 10 times. This baby is going to carry hydrogen hydrogen oxygen cryogenic upper stage, which give additional payload for geo missions. Couple of years ago, I told about original plan in 2014, shortcut to happiness. In 2015, they make a decision not to develop super heavy vehicle and use all of this to create a facility to launch lunar mission. Guess what? Has not been cancelled. Still under development. The biggest element is here. It's the third stage, and they're going to use new hydrogenic engine, which it's actually quite amazing, because for whole Soviet and Russian history, hydrogen propulsion has been used only twice. First time on Energia, on Central Core, and second time for Indian launcher GSLV as an upper stage. This is Soyuz 5. You can ignore main rated version. Potentially, most likely it would be only in cargo version. This is actually a Russian version of Zenit, upgrade of Russian version of Zenit. After 2014, it was a big break between Ukraine and Russia by various political reasons. So they decided to, and Zenit was quite good rocket to dump it. So they decided to make their own Russian version of Zenit. Remember I told you nothing would be wasted? This is reincarnation of Rus launch vehicle which called Rus-M, cancelled it around 2012. First stage powered by the same engine which powered Atlas V, RD-180, which was a lot of criticism for Roscosmos that engine which sold in US never has been used in Russian space program alone.
So, Igor, that RD-180,
yeah.
that's built, that's adapted in the United States, or is that all made?
It's all made in Russia, NPO Energomash, the company which produced. The only integration, I believe, happening in US, they assemble the rear section of stage with engine, so it's integration. I don't believe anything from engine producing. Obviously, US staff is responsible for trial firing before launch for testing. But engine completely 100% turnkey solution supplied to US, and they started to generate a surplus of them just in case something happened politically. I believe there are 15 or 20 of them sitting on the warehouse in US, in ULA warehouse somewhere. Okay, so this was medium class launcher. Samara Space Center, who is going to produce them. You can see Energia logo, but Energia is designer. They would be producing Samara anyway. This is Yenisei. So the major bits and pieces. These 6 blocks, 6 units, they would be propelled by upgrade of this engine, RD-171. It's effectively upgraded Zenit first stage engine. Again, with more thrust, better specific impulse. In the middle, they decided to use RD-180 engine from Atlas. What you can you see here? It's there are 2 upper stages. One of them is the Hydrolox engine, which would be used for TLE. It's effectively Earth departure stage, and little bit above and below spacecraft itself, it would be a block DM. It's the same piece which was used by N1 program. This is how it look like after preliminary design in beginning of 2019, man-rated version, cargo version. This watch they decided to do in the end of the year. And the most important stuff, they decided to, they increased amount of propellant for Earth departure stage, and diameter of the stage 4.4 meters, meaning they would not be able to deliver it by train. They have to use Ruslan AN 124 to deliver at least this stage to Vostochny. And again, it was a big deal because previously everything was transported by railroad. Yeah, this is upper stage. We have a lot of discussion. I predicted a couple of years ago that one engine would not be enough by purely propellant mass, because engine has a particular limit for how much propellant it can burn. Interestingly enough, this is RD0146. It has US parent, RL Chad. It has been done, it again never flew before, but it passed all of the certification. It's simply waiting its time. Again, the same stage would be used for manned version and for cargo version. Loaded propeller 55 tons. It's approximately, it's less than half of fuel mass for exploration upper stage, which actually hasn't been created yet, and probably twice more than Centaur. And this is what it's called Drakkar. This is actually a derivation of N1 upper stage, which is supposed to be a crash-landed stage to land, to be used to decelerate and provide a lunar orbit insertion. Any questions? Okay, it would be used in three launch vehicles: in man-rated NSA, in cargo NSA, and in cargo Dawn. Len, this is for you. I didn't find voiceover. I can do this again because I did not pay attention. So Dawn effectively is the NSA with additional hydrolock stage borrowed from Angara 5V. So if you look how they're playing space Lego, this is what it is. So from Soyuz 5, they're using first stage and they're using 6 blocks, the strap-on boosters for both of them. From Angara 5V, Dawn would be using the same upper stage, cryogenic upper stage. From Soyuz 6, it would be central core for both of them. So as you can see, effectively they try to combine, they try to increase number of ready blocks, but it would not be exactly the same blocks. They would going to use, it seems to be that because size of these modules are different, they're going to have multiple versions of the same engine, like with a different capacity and with a different burning time. The positive side of this, they can significantly decrease development time. So this time frame seems to be more realistic. This makes a sensation in August. What you can see here, it's probably next generation of propulsion. This part here is a nuclear reactor, and this part here is a propulsion system based on ion thrusters. It's a combined project which would be delivered together by Roscosmos and Rosatom, which is nuclear Russian nuclear agency. So you can see where engines would be installed, and you can see it from different angles. It's called TAM, Transportation and Energy Module, but in reality it's a nuclear propelled, thermonuclear propelled space tug. They could solve all the problem in cargo transportation in Earth-Moon system, probably not most optimal application. It can deliver crew to Mars orbit in 2 months. And I believe this is ultimate answer to the BFR from SpaceX. This is next generation of spaceflight because it doesn't use chemical production. This is whole thrusters they're trying to utilize. It's not necessarily would be in like flight ready hardware, at least what they're trying to do right now. The bad side of this story, the first flight only in 2030. They have a lot of challenges because whichever Russian putsch with the thermonuclear propulsion was on minuscule size by this. The total power of this device is 1 megawatt. They're looking for demo version, probably half of the capacity. Now,
Igor, is
yeah.
Is that just space transport? That's not launch or landing.
No. Okay, nuclear. It would be okay. Could you see this? It's a telescopic frame. They even the payload would be docking from this side. They try to keep distance because of radiation, and this unit it actually provides additional protection and shadow. So what would happen? Angara or Dawn would launch all of this device in special protection payload fairing. Plus, they call it differently because in case of emergency, it should be preserved, and it should not be crash landed. They learned their lesson from Canada disaster twice in 70s, when it was space Chernobyl effectively, and I believe USSR paid some compensation to Canadian government when one of the spacecraft they're supposed to be moved to the it's called graveyard orbit, and propulsion failed, and in the end of the day spacecraft disintegrated over Canada.
You've got a nuclear reactor there generating power for the iron engines. Why have you got solar panels?
Okay, I'm coming to this. I'm coming to this. So during launch, they're putting this stuff in protective shielding. So in case of abort, they would have launch escape system similar which has been used in 2018. So they will preserve everything and making sure that there is no leakage, and reactor actually would be inactive at this time. So until they get things to the low Earth orbit and move it to the safe distance of 800 kilometers, they would not start nuclear reactor. And in order to start nuclear reactor, they need electricity. This is why solar panels. So it's a chain of events. Okay, can I move on? Or this is actually propulsion, next generation propulsion, which allow humanity to move around solar system in reasonable time. And again, they're trying to sell it to military because they have some additional applications just in order to get funding. Now, answering your question, what is the current state of affairs with the Lunar Orbital Platform Gateway? It seems to be that Russia not coming to this party. The problem is Dmitry Rogozin, who is the head of Russian Space Agency, he's still persona non grata in US. So he personally can talk to his counterpart, and unless NASA administrator come to Russia, it doesn't improve situation at all. Additionally, unlike ISS agreement, when Russians use their standard and their technology, and US agreed to use different interfaces, the biggest obstacle now, US trying to lead, to be only leader, only single leader and single manager of whole program, probably based on bad experience dealing with Russians. But what happened in 2017, predecessor of Rogozin, Igor Komarov, made signed memorandum of understanding with the NASA, and which was it's actually happened during Congress in South Australia. Russia is supposed to provide a node unit, and it also would be used for EVA. US disagreed to use Russian space suits, which from my point of view, I believe was much handier because you don't need to spend so much time. So there are some political, everybody trying to pull blanket on their side. At the moment, I believe the reason they started to negotiate again, but there is nothing positive. I did not hear any news, so it probably would happen. This was the latest proposal. NASA agreed to use something similar to Zvezda service module as a backup because they're trying to use a propulsion module based on electrical propulsion as well, xenon-based one. Sorry, how much time do I have? Michael, I'm out or do I have time? Okay. And this is the latest, probably latest minimal configuration of this service module. The problem is until 2028, Russia would not have a mean of transportation to deliver this module by itself, so they either have to rely on SLS or they have to use multi-launch with Angara 5V, which hopefully would be ready in 2025. So timing is everything. Plan B for Russian, they obviously could use old-fashioned CUs and build something from remaining pieces which has been originally designed for ISS. Not sure about this because the rapid running of money. Probably more feasible option would be to cooperate with Chinese who are building their own station. At least it would be much cheaper. Plan C, they still have a plan to have a Russian national lunar orbital station. Like I said, reference mission 200 kilometers on polar lunar orbit. And they have two design, baseline design and heavy design for Russian lander. Unlike complicated things with the 3 parts, they decided to use old-fashioned Apollo-style ascent and descent module. This is preliminary designed by Energia. ExoMars mission, probably Andrew will tell you more about this. ExoMars second part, joint project between Roscosmos and European Space Agency. Roscosmos provides Proton launcher. With the Breeze upper stage will bring everything to the Martian orbit. From Russian side, there is an Institute of Space Research and NPO Lavochkin, which is only company which doing anything for interplanetary mission. Also, Russian part is a landing platform. If mission would be successful, which probably would, you can call it Russia return to the Mars, because last mission which they have a big trouble and very bad track record with Mars, unlike Venus when they succeeded almost on each mission. And European payload, which will be delivered by this platform, is I believe it's lunar rover, European lunar rover, which would be integral part of NASA sample return mission later on. Yeah, odd news, sea launch, maritime assets have been, as we speak, they have been moved from US to Russia, because company who bought them decided to they cannot use the neat rockets anymore because of some international complications. Vostочный upgrade. Spaceport active from 2016. At the moment, it only can launch cargo Soyuz-2 rockets. They already started upgrade last year, and first launch of Angara launch vehicle planning for 2023. It should be Angara 5 and probably Angara 1.2. The only two remaining rockets from the whole family. Phase 3, they will make Yenisei super heavy launch vehicle facilities. Construction will start in 2022, first launch 2028. This is how phase 2, what would look like spaceport Angara facility would look like after construction, hopefully. And on that note, it's an end of the era for two, especially for Proton, and in lesser for rocket launch vehicle, which actually were part of the same family, which has been created by Vladimir Chelomey, and Proton was actually biggest cargo workhorse in Soviet history. Majority of interplanetary missions, all space station modules, a lot of stuff has been delivered by this vehicle. There are two reasons. This rocket has an upper stage with a control system exclusively manufactured in Ukraine, both of them using the same poisonous fuel, and by pressure of green movement they decided to cancel it. Most of the pictures which you see in my presentation came from Anatoly Zak, so you're welcome to check his website because I cannot keep up with him. The guy producing probably 10 articles per day. Any more questions?
Thanks, Igor. That was awesome. Okay, as per usual, we've got way more stuff than we have time for, so we're just going to take a quick 5-minute break. Andrew's going to get his items all configured for his presentation, which will start in a couple of minutes.
The third rock from the sun, which we don't often get time to do. So we'll, but first up, there has been some concept developments approved by NASA in the last few days for some planetary missions. And from a 2019 competition, 4 finalists have been selected. And these are for missions that should go from the mid-20s onwards. First up is one called Trident. And yeah, I was worried about this because I've got some of my script. Oh, it's okay.
Sorry, fix up. Sorry, Andrew.
What you doing?
I couldn't see what you're showing.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry. All right. So, Trident is a moon of Neptune, and the plan, the picture shows a Voyager 2 image of Trident, and you may get Trident as a play on the mythology related to Neptune. It's going to be a single flyby, which means that they're going past pretty fast. They're going to map the surface. How they're going to do that on a single flyby, I don't know. The idea is to characterize the active processes that are there and to determine whether the predicted subsurface ocean exists. Remember that Neptune, Triton, is active geologically and has nitrogen geysers, so they want to map and find out how those originate. Right, going on to the next mission, which is under study, is the Veritas mission, which you can see from here is comparing the Earth with Venus and asking the question, why is Venus different from Earth? So Veritas stands for Venus, Emissivity, Radioscience, INSAR, Topography and Spectroscopy. And time doesn't allow me to explain all those words. It's going to look for the geological history of Venus, ask the question, why is Venus different from Earth, and map the infrared emissions coming from the surface, and that should tell whether or not there's volcanoes there. Now, Da Vinci Plus stands for, as you can read there, another Venus study, and it's going to have a descent sphere as well as an orbiter, if this mission is approved. And noble gases are explained down there. These are the inert gases, the helium, neon, argon, krypton, and xenon, with, quote, full electron outer shells. In other words, they're not reactive chemically. So, it's going to analyze Venusian atmosphere down to the surface as the sphere descends. It will understand how Venus formed and evolved, and the orbiter will map the different rock types on the surface, which has not been done. We know roughly the topography of the surface, but we don't know the rock types. And the plus is for cameras, which are going to be on both the descent sphere and the orbiter. So that should be pretty exciting to see Venus appear from the clouds and go down, much like we did with the Titan, the Huygens probe to Titan. IVO is the Io volcano observer. Now this will make close flybys of Io. It won't go into orbit around Io, make close flybys, but it'll be in orbit around Jupiter in much the same way as the Galileo probe was and the Juno probe is now. It will assess how magma is generated and erupted, and the question is there a magma ocean in the interior of Io? Because we know that the volcanism is generated by tidal heating. So, let's escape out of that. And with a bit of luck, I'll put the microphone down while I select these, because we're now going to be looking at Earth. And slide 1. And I need to use Shift key when I get to the last slide, which is the way over here, capstone. And should double click on it. Good one. There you go. Okay. Sorry. Oh, well, you've deselected the things now. No. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the beginning and select those, and hopefully, if I go File. I'll just try clicking on that. No, bother. All right, we might be able to work from there. Right, let's see. So we're going to look at the Australian bushfires from 2019 and 2020 and the view from space. First, we need to explain some statistics. A hectare is 100 metres by 100 metres. In other words, it's 10,000 square metres. There are 100 hectares in a square kilometre. Now, if you look up different sources for the burn areas, you'll find different quotes all over the place. So, using the quote that's in Wiki as of a day or two ago, it's 18.6 million hectares, or 186,000 square kilometres. Now, from Melbourne to Sydney is about nearly 800 and something kilometres. So if you divide that 800 or 860 into the area I quoted, there's a 200 kilometre bar on there. So the area that would be burnt would be equivalent to driving along the Hume Highway from Melbourne to Sydney, and 100 kilometres to your left and 100 kilometres to your right, all the way to Sydney, has been burnt out totally. That's what this season's bushfires has done. An enormous area has been burnt. These is a map of the major areas that have been burnt. Kangaroo Island we're going to look at, and we're going to look around Malakuta and up the coast and all the way onto Queensland. This is February the 1st, and we have maps which are prepared from satellite data and also on ground truthing, of course, and showing the areas which are actually burnt and the potential fire spread and where ember attacks could occur. So this data is prepared using a lot of satellite data plus some ground truthing. Now there's another term I need to explain, and that's pyrocumulonimbus. Pyro as in fire, cumulonimbus being those huge puffy clouds that you're all familiar with. So what happens is you get a fire burning and the smoke plume rises, it cools, forms a cloud, and from that you can get huge downbursts of rain and also lightning. If you're lucky, the rain puts out the fire. If you're unlucky, the lightning starts a new fire. So that we're going to see lots of pyrocumulonimbus pictures coming up. Now, this is not a photograph from space. This is a graph taken from NASA's fire web monitoring website, and the artist who's done this has plotted in colour to simulate fire where the fires are burning over a month-and-a-half period. So it's not all simultaneous. This is over a period of time. But it does give you some idea of the extensive spread where these fires have been in the last few months. Notice down in eastern Victoria and southern New South Wales, the fires are particularly intense. So these are not the pictures of the fires. This is a graph showing where the fires have been. NASA has prepared this little graph for us showing the different satellites that have been used to monitor our bushfires. Now we're going to be looking at some of the data from each of these satellites, so I won't go through the names of them here now, but that gives you an overview of how it's done in short term, from hours to days, out to weeks and months. First of all, let's go up on the International Space Station, where astronauts take photographs if they have time, and remember that the space station is in low Earth orbit, 400 kilometres above the Earth, so it passes across any one area like Melbourne, within sight of Melbourne about 5 or 6 times a day. So looking straight down, here are some pyrocumulonimbus clouds, and this was taken by Luca Parmitano, if I remember correctly. Another view of a pyrocumulonimbus cloud. Huge clouds of smoke forming genuine actual clouds as well. In this photograph, you can see, I think this was taken by, her name will come to me in a moment. She just set the record for being in space for a woman. And you can see here, I should really enlarge that up because it's really a huge photograph, but we won't have time tonight to do most of the enlargements. Once again, you can see where there's fires burning, but also this cloud bank is not cloud, this is smoke down the bottom of the picture. Once again, smoke. See that brownish area? That's smoke from the bushfires. There is an edge to the smoke, of course, and we can see the normal desert at the top, or outback at the top, and we can see the smoke at the bottom. Once again, you can see the smoke over eastern Australia. Here we can see actual active fire fronts. So lots of fire fronts there. Now, another satellite's called Terra. it's been in orbit now for nearly 20 years, and it's in low Earth orbit, and it primarily measures land features, as you might guess from its name, Terra. That's a picture of it in assembly before launch. One of the instruments on it is the multi-angle imaging spectroradiometer. Now, radiometer is important because it collects the radiation coming off the Earth, which is basically reflected sunlight, but in different wavebands. And it can also look forward of its flight, straight down the nadir, and also behind where it's been. It's got a number of instruments which are shown here, and we're going to be looking mainly at the MISR images. So here we go, looking down. Now on some of these here you can see Terra Modus is who, the satellite's Terra, Modus is the instrument, and the dates are down here. This is 2019, December the 31st. Now, within each satellite group, I've organised them pretty much in chronological order, but not necessarily. So here's Southern Australia at that time. Notice the pyrocumulonimbus clouds and also lots of fire fronts there, showing up as red. That smoke travelled around the world. In particular, it travelled over New Zealand and darkened the skies there. I remember as a child being at school in the South Island and the sky was orange. And they said, oh, that's from the Australian bushfires. And that was way back in the 1950s. Now, but you can see here the smoke around here as well. So it's travelled right around the world and came back on us. This is a long-wave radiation map, the outgoing radiation in watts per square metre. And you can see Australia's in the hot zone here, partly because of the fires, but also because of the warm on the heat on the Indian Ocean, which is unusually warm. Now, Kangaroo Island, and there you can see that fires are still burning, and about half the island has been burnt out at this stage. This is dust. Remember that dust storm we had? We had two of them actually here in Melbourne. And that came from Central Australia. And this is the dust as seen by the Terra satellite. Once again, you can see the dust in Central Australia passing over there. We only got a glancing glow of it, a glancing blow from that dust storm. The most of it went out over New South Wales and out over the Tasman Sea. That dust landed, some of it landed on in the Southern Alps on the ice and darkened the snow there. Now, the red on this picture is not the actual flames. This is infrared, as well as visible. And the infrared is where the ground is hot. So for some days after the fire passes by, the ground is still hot. And so we see here the advancing fires around Aurora Valley and Canberra. In a different wave band, we see that same fire front. Once again, we can see where the active fires are by the heat radiation coming from the fires. Now, Suomi. Again, it's another satellite in low Earth orbit, and it can image the Earth both day and night, which is very helpful. There's a picture of the satellite itself and some of the instruments on board, and in particular, for our use here, the Visible and Infrared Imaging Radiometer Suite, VIRS, is important. So this is how Australia looked on January the 11th in 2010. You might call it normal. Well, this is how it looked on January the 4th of this year. 10-year difference. See that? And that. Okay. Now, once again, we can see the smoke travelling out across the Pacific Ocean and heading towards South America. The active fire fronts are quite prominent there. So this is on January the 1st. And notice there are lots of fires in Central Australia as well. So these are Suomi pictures. One of the instruments is able to pick up the aerosols and other particles that are in the atmosphere. And here's an aerosol map. And you can see in this animation how those aerosols are spreading out across the Pacific Ocean, across South America, and they come back around across the Indian Ocean. All right. Once again, this is from the OMPS instrument on February the 2nd. This is November 11 last year. And I said it can take pictures in day and night. And this is a nighttime picture. You probably recognize the coast on the left-hand side of the picture. And you can see the active lights of towns as well as the fires. This is the area around Canberra on February the 1st. You can see the lights of Canberra there, but also the fires burning south of Canberra and to the east. All right. Am I going the right way? Yes. Okay, this is a smoke. Hello. Right. We're still in Suomi, and this is now the 13th of January. Notice Kangaroo Island, all red, and we're getting some fire burns as well in Victoria. This animation, supposed to be an animation, no, still picture, sorry, shows the ultraviolet aerosol index. It picks up the ultraviolet light that's being reflected off the aerosols, and you can see that we've got a large plume heading south across Tasmania and out south of New Zealand, and then across Antarctica. Once again, this is a Vers image from Suomi. And an animation from the visible and aerosols, combining both the aerosol data with an actual visible image. All right. Now, Himawari, Japanese meteorological satellite, and it's geostationary and looks down over Asia and Australia. It has a number of instruments which are relevant to our story tonight, and there's a big artist's impression of it in orbit. And on November the 7th, this is what it saw. And this one is from November the 6th through to the 11th. Right. And here we're on November the 8th. And December the 20th. And this is the last day of last year. Notice that as we go into night time, it sees Himawari sees quite clearly where the fires are actually burning. So that's New Year's Eve. All right. So it takes a picture about every 10 minutes. All right, let's move on. The orange arrow there points to the smoke plume heading downwind. And once again, the Japanese satellite has shown us quite nicely how that smoke has been moving around. We were lucky here in Melbourne. We hardly got any smoke at all, unlike people in Sydney, which got lots of it. You notice how at dusk that smoke on the eastern limb, that's the right-hand side, shows up best just at sunset. You can see it. All right. And that's a still from that same animation. And there's smoke spreading right out over New Zealand. Landsat 8. And it's mainly mapping land vegetation and geology. It's in low Earth orbit again. And February the 8th of 2009. Why am I going back to 2009, 2009? Well, right, Black Saturday. And here is what you can see there, the smoke and stuff, as well as a cloud layer moving across on that date. Now compare that with January the 3rd. And now the fires in Gippsland, and the smoke is so much more massive. Black Saturday killed lots of people, but this has devastated the countryside. Anyway, let's move on. Kangaroo Island, November the 2nd last year. Looks nice, doesn't it? Good place to go for a holiday. And here we are on January the 3rd of this year, and you can see already the smoke. And later, I'll come back to Kangaroo Island. Now, this is the area around Lithgow. Once again, I point out the red areas are not smoke. It's not flames. It's hot earth, which is where the fires are or have been. This includes the visible, and so you see how the infrared can penetrate through that cloud layer. Right. Now we go to the Wallamai National Park. Remember the Wallamai pine? Some of those trees are burnt out. So you can see the change from, that's the 10th, so that's October 28, and that's November 13. Now, this is in July of this year, July last year, and Western Victoria. And this is on December the 31st. Now the next picture is within that box for the Landsat. So these are still Landsat pictures. And Landsat could not see through the smoke. And this is on January the 9th. Now back to Kangaroo Island. You can see burn scars and all there. And now in Central Australia, we have got, this is goldfields actually, goldfields. And you can see lots of fires there, a different sort. And you can see the marks here. These are from older bushfires or scrub fires, right? They show up quite characteristically in these pictures. Now moving on, November the 1st last year, active fires shown in red, and January the 3rd. So change there. Let's have a look. See the change. All right, let's move on. This is in course, the thing that happened after the fires, put the fires out, were these huge rainstorms. Now here you can see, let's see if I get the little pointer working. Here's where it's been burnt out. And see the river and the unburned vegetation. Now look at the next picture. Oops. Wrong way. Here we have flooded areas. Notice the sediment flowing out into the ocean from the river. And a close-up of that. And you can see the flooded areas. So Landsat can also look at the recovery and what happens as things after the fires have gone. Now, aqua, water, aqueous. So it's mainly mapping resources. It's in low Earth orbit. There's a satellite. And these are some of the views that Aqua acquired. I won't go through the dates and times. Some more pyrocumulonimbus clouds there.
Sorry, Andrew, why would the aqua satellite show up?
Why does it?
Necessarily aqueous clouds.
So what is the?
The clouds wouldn't be that aqueous. See what I mean?
The clouds reflecting the sunlight.
If you're honing it onto water.
Oh, yeah, but it's designed to study the water, but it's also can, it takes ordinary photographs as well, and so it can be used for this sort of imaging. Now, notice the red areas, because it does have it can look at infrared radiation coming through from the fires. These are not the actual flames, this is just simply where the hot spots are. They're scattered all over the country. And I'm not going to enlarge that, but it actually shows the movement of the smoke down from Australia. Aura. Now, Aura is studying the atmosphere. Again, here's some of the things that it was able to do. It studies and tracks just below its ground track only. It doesn't do wide area pictures. Now, here is an animation showing in December into January. Now notice the areas which are red have got lots of particles in the air. And go through it once more. Okay, so that's aura. This is carbon monoxide that's in the atmosphere. Notice the trend from July, peaking in November, and then suddenly, whoosh, in January, it goes up because of the bushfires. Lots of carbon, and that's in gigograms. Now, global precipitation measurement is a joint US-Japan satellite. Its main mission is to measure rainfall, and it was able to again come in on those storms and things that we had. Calypso measures aerosols. It's in low Earth orbit. That's a picture of it. See a joint European and NASA satellite. That's what it looks like. And of interest to us is the imaging infrared radiometer and also the LiDAR. It's a typical orbit is like that. And here is the sort of data it returns. Now, across the bottom, you can read the latitude, and you notice that you get peaks of material in the atmosphere when you cross the equator. And here's smoke from Australia showing up quite clearly, and this happens to be over New Zealand. So Calypso was able to monitor the material coming down. All right, there's another view of Calypso, its orbit, and the data it returns. And again, takes a little while to explain that one, but again, you can see the material now heading over South America. All right, Worldview is a privately owned satellite in low Earth orbit. That's it. And it can look in all sorts of spectral bands. And in particular, it can look through smoke quite nicely. And so we're looking here at near Eden, and we're looking down through the smoke at the fire fronts in different wave bands. There's still at Eden. And notice the point down there where there's an orange thing. We just zoom in on that, and you can see quite good for mapping the extent of the fires. And Australia doesn't have a fire mapping satellite, and if it wants this data, it has to buy it from places like Maxar. All right, Sentinel, a series of European satellites. They carry some infrared sensors that can see through smoke. It's in low Earth orbit, and there are a number of these satellites for the European Space Agency. There's a whole constellation, collection of them. Again, they look at all sorts of wave bands and different ways of looking at it. And this is a thermal infrared image. Point out that the color shows temperature, not flames. This is not the actual flames. This is the temperature. And remember that lingering smoke is cool, so it shows as blue. You see the blue haze over there. And the thermal infrared can pass through the smoke because its wavelength is longer than the diameter of the smoke particles. Whereas visible light, its wavelength is shorter than the size of the particles. So you can see here where the very bright red and yellow is where it's very hot, and it cools down where it's been. So it's good for mapping where the fire is and where it has been. All right, so here we go with Sentinel. This is Eastern Australia before the fires. And now we can see the large areas here being burnt and smoke. And this is in Lake Cunat in Queensland. See the difference? It's pretty much the same. All right. So Sentinel is very good at looking through the smoke. Wonderful satellite. And we're nearly done. So we're just going to flick through some of these real fast, even though they're most amazing photographs, because my time is up. Kangaroo, I said we look at Kangaroo Island. That's before the fire. And that's Victoria and the Kangaroo again. See the changes. All right. Yeah. Okay, I was going to show you an animation, but I don't have time now. And Sentinel 3A, for example, is very good at mapping where the fires are and have been. And it has, this graph needs to be enlarged, but it shows the actual radiative power from the thing compared to normal. Now, here's how the mapping from Sentinel can be used in change maps. And and you can animate the data, showing the spread of the material over successive days. All right. And there are people who say that Australia doesn't need satellites and it doesn't need fire mapping satellites. So this is courtesy of the Europeans. They paid for that. We didn't. All right. And again, from Sentinel data, showing the spread of the fires over periods of time. Right. And also the smoke. Right. Now this is a model of smoke drift from Australian fires. And this is alleged to be the soot landing on the Southern Alps in New Zealand. But I've looked at this before and after, and I don't see it. Anyway, okay. And that's the one that New Zealand has been asked to launch for America, a mission to the moon. All right. Well, I better just finish there. If you can bear with me for one more minute. I've got one little interesting thing to show you, which is now hopefully this is going to work. Yes, it looks like we're online. This is on a NASA website, and it's my last thing I'll be showing you tonight as we head into 4 minutes overtime. And we're just waiting for it to load. Okay, I'll just explain what it will show if it comes up. The clouds in 3 dimensions. The smoke, pools of smoke in 3 dimensions. And then in this animation, we can at will fly around it and have a look at it from all different angles and different heights and altitudes. So I think what we'll do is I'll call it a night here. And if that loads, then anyone who's interested, I'll show. Thanks, Peter.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, everyone. That's the end of the night. We've run a little bit over time, but thank you so much. Sorry, Andrew, you got squeezed down a bit at the end. Thanks to our speakers, Angelo and Igor and Andrew, and everyone else, and Ashley again for the AV and everything like that. That's it for tonight. Safe drive home. We'll see you next month. It's March 27th? No, 27th. And we're not sure what we're going to show. If you've got any ideas, if you want to come and talk about something, please let us know. Thanks.